Our next speaker is David Hemson. David Hemson is a union organizer in South Africa, was involved in formation of COSATO, and is also fighting to get research on what's happened with the AFL-CIO.
Comrades, this is a marvelous opportunity to get all the news, all the research, all the links that we need. So I'll start in the traditional South African labor movement style by shouting, Amandla! Awethu! That is, power is ours, power to the workers. Siyaya epitoli. That is, we are on our way to Pretoria, the capital of South Africa, to turn it into a workers' republic. That's what we're fighting for in South Africa. But we have made advances, but we've had many obstacles on our way, and we've also got to tell the truth to each other, or find the truth and tell it to each other. The truth is, why did it take so long to get rid of apartheid? What were the obstacles in our way? Why did we not have a marvelous international workers' movement in support of the strikes of black workers from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even now, with companies which are linked to Israel, oppressing our workers, firing our workers, and calling for international solidarity? But I have to start with a look backwards. My birth in the labor movement came in 1973 when I was a young organizer of trade unions in Durban, very apprehensive white boy, without much Zulu, without all those contacts that I was wanting to build. But within 24 hours, in a very short time indeed, we had mass strikes. We had workers marching down the streets of Durban, right in the center of Durban, which is the major port of South Africa. Dock workers on strike, abattoir workers, that is the meat cutters workers, the workers right in the center of town, municipal workers. It was just streams of workers from one side of the town to the other, out into the outskirts in Pinetown, which was a major industrial center, up north into the sugarcane plantations, everywhere. The workers were shouting for higher wages, for doubling the wages, for trebling wages, and having the right to strike. The regime said, "Where are your leaders? Send your leaders to us, we'll talk to them." And they said, "No, we know your game. We are not providing you with leaders. You talk to us in the streets. We'll negotiate that way. Tell us what we'll offer. We'll shout whether we accept it or not." And that is the birth of the trade union movement, or the rebirth, because we've had a longer history than 73, the rebirth of the movement in South Africa. And I was privileged to be part of that movement for, I think, a whole of 10 months, because we knew that after a time, there would be a knock on the door, you'd be declared a communist, you'd be house arrested if you were lucky, or you'd be put in detention and maybe murdered. That was the perspective if you were a trade union organizer at that time. But when we were building, and in that early phase of movement, we looked out to the labor movement, and we had to think about Britain, because that was a colonial master. We knew there were massive trade unions in Britain. We knew there were massive trade unions in America. We'd all studied a bit of our history. We knew the marvelous struggles in the 1930s. We knew there were live workers which would listen to us and want to support us. If we were in struggle in the textile industry, we would get support, or the garment industry, or the dock workers. We heard about what happened in San Francisco. We thought we could make all these links, it would be automatic. We'd have freedom in 5 years, maybe 3 years, if we had that solidarity. In 1973, we could have had freedom in 1980, even earlier. But what did we find? We started the movement with nothing, not a penny to our name. We didn't ask for grants. Please help us. We try to do something. Big NGOs, give us a chance. We organized the workers. Each worker gave 10 cents of their money a week. Not much, But you add 10,000 workers times 10 cents, it starts to add up to something. We could actually get an office. We could actually get cars. But what do the workers want? Funeral benefits. Funeral, it's the last thing in my mind I thought workers would want. But death is such a factor in black workers' lives that a decent funeral was what people wanted. We did that, and out of that came the unions. I won't go into that history, but let me just mention, we'd formed then the Metal and Allied Workers Union, we'd formed a furniture union, we'd formed a transport union, we'd formed unions throughout the garment sector, furniture sector, beyond. That was my particular job with the furniture industry. What were we struggling for? We were struggling against a slave labor system, so that black people were discriminated because the whole capitalist system had to keep labor cheap. And the cheap labor system wasn't just low wages. It has meant that if you were black, you had to carry a passport everywhere you go, which said where you employed, who your master was, and how you could be disciplined and punished for any infraction. That was the urban side. In the rural area, you had chiefs who were appointed by the regime to keep control in the rural areas. They would tell you if you could have a scrap of land or not, whether you could have a house in the rural area or not. And if they didn't like you, you could be deported, your house demolished, and all the rest of it. So it was a despotism, a white despotism in the urban areas, if I could use the term, and black despotism in the rural areas. The workers knew this. They were migrant workers. They were coming into the city, not allowed to have houses, but living in barracks, like a military barracks, with a disciplined order of guards and so forth, and causes and so forth, with guns, would maintain order, law and order. And that was the prospect. How did you get mass strikes out of this? Because labor is concentrated by capital. Even those barracks, which they thought they controlled, we had our networks into those barracks. We knew who we could trust and who we couldn't trust. And some of those people that we couldn't trust had little accidents. And they would be found, well, it wasn't the proudest moment, but they'd be found dead because they'd stood against the workers. And maybe they had an accident, and maybe it was a boyfriend who stabbed them in the back, or maybe it was one of our guys who didn't ask questions. But we were able to organize and to develop that time. No matter when they banned me and declared me a communist and house arrest and so forth, the movement went on. And eventually I ended up in exile, and I went to the ICFTU, International Confederation of Free Trade Unions. They said they were going to organize, they would help us, they would do all kinds of things for us. And so I went to them and said, now what are you guys doing? We're not after the cash. What we want is solidarity. When we are on strike, give us the support. When we are struggling, give us the support. Don't give us money to turn us into bureaucrats. Give us solidarity. That's what we want. We want our own worker-controlled trade unions. We've heard that you're up to your tricks with all kinds of funny things going on. We don't want labor education in the abstract. We want it in the concrete. That's what we're doing. Please help us. And they said, oh, very good. We'll see what we can do. And there was one nice guy. This was a meeting in Brussels in 1976, February the 19th, 1976. I've just found my notes the other day. And Andrew Kalimbo, who at least was sort of halfway on the side of the workers, he would veer this way and that. So many of the bureaucrats were with us and they're not with us. He said, Dave, before you go to sleep, I've got a little file. It's very confidential. Don't tell anybody about it, but just read it and tell me what you think. That file was a printout of a declaration by the AFL-CIO that they were going to give $1 million to Chief Buthelezi. Chief Buthelezi, what is this? I said to him, this is outrageous. All we know about Chief Buthelezi is that he fired the one person in the administration who was on our side and prepared to march on us with strike. He abused him, and when we had meetings of workers, I was present, African trade unionists were present, and when he wanted to have a go at us, he wouldn't have a go at me. He knew that I was with my white skin or I could answer him. He would pick on some poor person living in a shack area and say, who are you to call and talk to me like that. In other words, he was a chief. He was a king. He wanted you to bend down and kneel and say, please, Baba, give me something, you know. And that was the attitude we had. And he broke the trade unions. He did everything he could not to strengthen our union. What he wanted was to build our unions, bring them into his political movement, his ethnic movement. Remember, he's a paid official of the apartheid state. The only reason we dealt with him was because some of our members had an illusion. They thought this man would help us. Surely he would. He's a black man like us. He'll surely come and help us. Please, don't misunderstanding, a big misunderstanding which took many thousands of people dead to clarify that little issue. The ICF2 gave dribbles of fund. The AFL-CIO gave us nothing. And then I realized why. Why on earth would they put a Chief Buthelezi forward? No union in America had thought of it. No union on our side had put of it. But there it was, a secret document. That was all clarified in August 1982 when they declared that Chief Buthelezi would get the George Meany Human Rights Award. Human Rights Award. Where did that come from? And then they had a visit to South Africa immediately thereafter from the 6th to the 17th of September 1982. Not one trade unionist, even the total sellouts, didn't think this was a good idea. No one even knew where this idea had come from. When they called a meeting at which Chief Buthelezi should have been present with the trade unions, I've got the list, 56 people or so were invited. About 6 people turned up, and Chief Buthelezi was such a big hero, he couldn't appear with only 6 people, so he didn't turn up. It was a complete flop. Why did they do it? The reason we found out later was the AFL-CIO, in collusion with whoever the security crats were at that time in South Africa. Remember that in America, the elite of the Army of South Africa was trained, I found out later, in Kansas and Oklahoma in secret military camps in America and sent back to Africa to oppress our workers and workers throughout the region as well, to strengthen the army against the workers and against the people. Again, this is something I've only just discovered now. But in other words, there are many strands involved here. We now have clarified what the role of Chief Buthelezi was. In 1985, we launched the Congress of South African Trade Unions. That Congress had as its theme freedom and socialism. And socialism, not just freedom, well, real freedom. Freedom so that you've got a job, you've got a decent wage, you've got a house, you've got good education for your kids. That's freedom, has some material base to it, and people thought that was called socialism. And it is what you'd call socialism. You would have a right to life, a right to education, a right to food, and a right to organize free democratic trade unions. The AFL-CIO had another idea in giving an award and a large sum of money to Chief Buthelezi. He then launched a counter-union movement called UWUSA, the Union of Workers of South Africa. Its slogan were, "No strikes." Imagine that. What a great slogan. And when it was launched, the security police, the killers of our people, were there and available. I've just found out that about a week ago from people who tell me they were there and they saw these people who had killed so many of our fighters in their torture chambers and so forth. They were present there. Chief Buthelezi arrived in a helicopter of whoever gave that to him, we don't know. That wasn't our style of operation. And they launched UWUSA with the coffins of COSATO written on it, the names of the leaders of the labor movement written on the coffins. In other words, we are going to kill you. That was their immediate aim and objective. And then the killing started. The youth in my home area, KwaZulu-Natal, are fighting against this chiefly order, an old patriarchal order where the chiefs beat the youth and all the rest of it into shape. Those comrades I fought with, and when I came back to South Africa in 1990 after exile, and they fought, and he declared, this is Chief Buthelezi, this is a people's war against me. It's communists trying to kill me. And so he got support from Germany, America, Britain, everywhere else. I launched his Zawusa, and then launched the Inkatha movement, which became a killing operation of some order. And it's still not known exactly how it operated because, as I will explain, the South African Army organized training camps for his people in the Inkatha movement to turn them into professional killers, not just someone who just walked down with a gun and just casually shoot someone who knew exactly how to kill a whole range of people in a village or something of that kind, to surround, to use tactics, cordons and searches and all the rest of it. They trained them and then let them out. And when these people were found to kill many people, and one of them in particular, I think, had a score of killing 14 comrades, and Chief Buthelezi was asked about how did that happen. He said, he's a very professional sharpshooter. All praise to him. The more he kills, the better. That is the statement of the man who was supported by the AFL-CIO. This is a man of war crimes. When it came to the truth and reconciliation, you have to tell the truth to have reconciliation in South Africa. He refused to tell the truth. He refused to appear before the TRC. I've got nothing to be ashamed of. But when people gave evidence that his people had been sent and trained by the army, he had launched a Zawusa to go and kill our trade union members, he said, that's all lies, and I'll take anyone to court. He never took anyone to court. But unfortunately, all those records have been kept quiet. Why? Because after the TRC, it was an idea that we should all hug each other and be okay. No one should disclose what really happened. Let's just say we're over the hump and we're into freedom. But who is to tend to the graves of our comrades? Who's to deal with those people like Jabu Ndlovu, you'll see her name in front of here, who were killed mercilessly and whose families suffered enormously, paid by the American government? Who's to make compensation? Who's to tell the truth? We would love to have the truth. What really happened? Where did that Meany award come from? What was behind it all? We are not told. The South African government has closed the files. I can't even get the files of who spied on me in the 1970s and 80s under apartheid. That's closed. It seems impossible to get hold of. It's a struggle to get to the truth because the truth still matters. And what I'm suggesting now is we must fight a campaign not only to open the books, withdraw that Meany award. No Meany awards to people who have committed crimes against the people. Bring it back to America, cleanse the CIO, cleanse our unions of such collaboration, support our workers in struggle. We'll support you all the way too, as far as we can, with the Amazon workers, with the textile workers in the South, with the workers who are working in uncertain labor contracts and all the rest of it. We understand what it is and we're fighting with you. Let's put it forward to the CIO. We've got a strong resolution that we can put forward. Add to that, withdraw the Meany Award to Chief Jabu Buthelezi. Shame on you that you should do such a thing. Shame on you that you stabbed us in the back. Thank you, comrades. Amandla.